Why do so many women vote Democrat versus Republican? Why are there so many women in Congress who are Democrats compared to Republican? That's the theme of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And I have a great guest today, Michelle Easton. She has written a book, How to Raise a Conservative Daughter. And in the second segment of Bold and Blunt, I'm going to talk about why we need to concern ourselves as patriotic Americans, as limited government type Americans, as Americans who like to take their rights from God, not government type of Americans, why we need to concern ourselves with having more women in this country who are conservative. And so stay tuned for that. That's coming up in the second segment. And first, we're going to look at some of the stats, the statistics that show women in America still to this day, by and large, vote Democrat, believe in the Democrat Party platform, or do they? Are they just conditioned to think that way? We're going to look at that. Before I get into that, though, heads up, Washington Times, particularly for Bold and Blunt listeners, is offering a special deal for a digital subscription for a full year of all the Washington Times has to offer. News, commentaries, podcasts, you'll get it all. You'll get it all for a year at a 50% discount. Go to washingtontimes.com/Cheryl, type in your info, and you'll have access to everything the Washington Times has to offer. Arm yourself. Arm yourself with what you need to fight the lies and deceptions of the mainstream media. And while you're arming yourself, you're supporting the Washington Times and all the staff at the Washington Times who work 24/7 to bring you the information that you won't get elsewhere. There are few sources that Americans can really turn to these days to trust that they're getting the facts. And I have to say, Washington Times is one of them. So I'm asking you to please support us here at the Washington Times so that we can continue to bring you the info you need to fight the socialists and the communists and the collectivists and the Marxists busily trying to destroy our great nation. And they're doing it. They're doing it by going after women and girls and telling them that the issues that should be top concerns for women and girls are abortion. Abortion, right? That's like the number one issue that Democrats always campaign on when they want to go after the women vote. And by and large, women are buying into the leftist line of logic that freedom means the ability to have recreational sex and not pay consequences for it. You can just get an abortion if you get pregnant. No big deal. And women and girls are being trained by the Democrat Party to believe that that is freedom. That is a basic civil right. That is a basic natural human right, God-given right to abort your baby. So the show isn't about abortion. It's about how women vote, how women think politically, and why we need more conservative-minded women in America. From Pew Research in January, this quote, "Women make up a much bigger share of congressional Democrats." The research piece is talking about how many congressional members are women, and then looking at the numbers of congressional members who are women, who are Democrats, members of the Democrat Party versus members of the Republican Party. So women make up a much bigger share of congressional Democrats, 38%, than Republicans, 14%. That's huge. That's a big difference, right? That's a very big difference. And this is looking at the 117th Congress. It was January 2021 when Pew conducted this. And the headline is a record number of women are serving in the 117th Congress. Women make up just over a quarter of all members of the 117th Congress, the highest percentage in U.S. history, and a considerable increase from where things stood even a decade ago, Pew reported. But most are Democrats, right? Again, from Pew, across both chambers, there are 106 Democratic women and 38 Republican women in the new Congress. Women account for 40% of House Democrats and 32% of Senate Democrats, compared with 14% of House Republicans and 16% of Senate Republicans. Now, why is that? Why do so many women align themselves with the Democrat Party versus the Republican Party? And I have to say, as a conservative woman, this is something that has baffled me for years, because I don't understand how women who care about supposedly women issues are family, right? Women issues, according to politicians who conduct their polls and slant their candidates to deliver messages to certain segments of society in special ways, special specific ways that gather votes from those special segments of society. Politicians, by and large, believe that the issues that are concerning most to women deal with family, deal with children, deal with education, and deal with health, meaning medical and health issues. Things like foreign policy supposedly bore us. We care little about foreign policy. Things like budgets and, those things dealing with all those confusing numbers and math. We don't do math, according to politicians. So we don't get into budget issues. But family, healthcare, education, and personal medical decisions defined by the left as the right to abort on demand. Those are all the issues supposedly that concern women in America. The Atlantic wrote in 2020 this headline: "Why Men Vote for Republicans and Women Vote for Democrats. The gender gap," The Atlantic wrote, "is larger than ever." The URL headline, it's interesting, reads this way: "How Women Became Democratic Partisans." How indeed did that happen? Why did women, this is The Atlantic posing this question, why did women leapfrog American men in voting in just a few decades? And why did they lurch left? It starts with the baby boomers, The Atlantic found. Let me read from The Atlantic a bit. "Women born in the late 19th or early 20th century were less likely than men to go to the polls, either because voting was an unfamiliar ritual or because they felt discouraged by their families from participating in politics, or both. The boomers, the baby boomers, were far less sheepish. They grew up expecting a college education and a work life outside the home. Voting to them seemed natural. They may also have been galvanized by the fight over the Equal Rights Amendment, which brought home the importance of politics in women's lives." And then the piece goes on to take a look at Ronald Reagan and the Reagan effect. That's when the Republican Party moved sharply to the right on a handful of issues relevant to women, The Atlantic wrote. The Republican Party, dropped its support of the Equal Rights Amendment, embraced an anti-abortion position, and courted conservative Christians who lamented the effect of working women on traditional families. Although Reagan handily won election, he lost women by 8 points. Okay, so they're blaming Reagan, they're blaming conservative principles, they're blaming Christian conservative principles in particular as the lurch of women in America from the Republican Party to the Democrat Party. And I suppose you can make a certain case that there's a small segment of Christian conservatives, the traditionalists, the fundamentalists, who do think that women belong in the home, that a woman's place is in the home, and that she has no business entering the work field when she has children, when she has family to caretake at home. The left, though, has taken that small segment of Christian conservative fundamentalism, and exploited it for political gain, and made it seem as if this is the norm in the Republican Party. It certainly isn't. It's ridiculous. The media has truly done a great job of joining the Democrat Party in exploiting that deception. As a matter of fact, The Atlantic admits it. The unprecedented split between male and female voters in 1980, The Atlantic wrote, caused a media frenzy. The National Organization for Women wrote in its newspaper's following issue, "Women vote differently than men. Feminist bloc emerges in 1980 elections." And that's when the gender gap started being reported. In the next few decades, the parties became more polarized. Conservative elites sorted into the Republican Party, while liberal elites sorted into the Democratic Party, and voters followed. Okay, so that's some historical roots. It still doesn't explain why women really still vote Democrat when you consider if one of the key issues for women is freedom for their children, a free America for their children. It doesn't explain why so many women in America would align themselves with the Democrat Party. This day in history, July 24th, 1959, this headline from History.com. Richard Nixon and Nikita Khrushchev have a, quote, kitchen debate. Let me read from this. In late 1958, the Soviet Union and the United States agreed to set up national exhibitions in each other's nation as part of their new emphasis on cultural exchanges. The Soviet exhibition opened in New York City in June 1959. The U.S. exhibition opened in Moscow in July. And on July 24th, before the Moscow exhibition was officially open to the public, then Vice President Richard Nixon served as a host for a visit by Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. I'm reading. As Nixon led Khrushchev through the American exhibition, the Soviet leader's famous temper began to flare. When Nixon demonstrated some new American color television sets, Khrushchev launched into an attack on the so-called Captive Nations Resolution passed by the U.S. Congress just days before. The resolution condemned the Soviet control of the captive peoples of Eastern Europe and asked all Americans to pray for their deliverance. No wonder Khrushchev took offense, right? Here you have a communist nation that's atheist, and you've got an entire nation of American people praying for the atheist, godless communists. All right, back to History.com. After denouncing the resolution, Khrushchev then sneered at the U.S. technology on display, proclaiming that the Soviet Union would have the same sort of gadgets and appliances within a few years. Nixon, never one to shy away from a debate, goaded Khrushchev by stating that the Russian leader should not be afraid of ideas. After all, you don't know everything. The Soviet leader snapped at Nixon, "You don't know anything about communism except fear of it." Well, just to skip down a bit, the kitchen debate was front page news in the United States the next day. For a few moments in the confines of a modern kitchen, the diplomatic gloves had come off, and America and the Soviet Union had verbally jousted over which system was superior, communism or capitalism. We all know how this narrative ends. Of course, capitalism is better than communism. It's freedom. If capitalism, historically speaking, has already been pitted against communism in terms of how women play into those systems, the work women traditionally did at the time of testing in society, if it's already been historically proven that capitalism is freedom and communism for women is enslavement and drudgery, then why would women vote Democrat? Which leads into the larger theme of today's Bold and Blunt, How to Raise a Conservative Daughter, a new book written by Michelle Easton, who is the president of the Claire Booth Luce Center for Conservative Women. Michelle, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Well, it's my pleasure to be with you.
How to Raise a Conservative Daughter. It's this great new book you have out, published by Regnery, and I really want to ask, why'd you write this in the first place?
Well, I've been 28 years now running the Claire Booth Luce Center for Conservative Women and working with these really outstanding young women of college age. And I started to notice some things that had happened in their upbringing and what they did growing up that made them into such gracious, smart, conservative women. Meanwhile, a lot of parents, a lot of our supporters here are worried about how their daughters are going to turn out. And so I thought, well, I'm going to share what I've learned over 28 years with them, with parents, grandparents, anybody involved in the raising of a young woman, because it's not like it used to be in the old days where if your family was conservative and you went to church or synagogue, you had a pretty good shot. It's not that way anymore because of the cultural climate, the social media, the school indoctrination. It's not a fair fight anymore. So what I argue in here is that parents and others involved have to start to think about it when their girls are little. Think about the principles, and I give them a book full of practical real-life applications that they can use from the time their girls are little. Not lecturing, not pounding on them, just shaping things in their life to have a better shot at them turning out to be conservative.
Now, how do you define conservative? How do you define conservative women these days? Because I'm sure you ask a dozen people, you will get a dozen different definitions.
Right. Well, there's 11 chapters, and really looking at the titles of most of them would be good. For example, chapter 1, self-worth flows from God, not government. The religion and freedom are inextricably linked, and I think that's something that is a cornerstone to be conservative. Another chapter is family first, the importance of a strong, close family relationships, understanding, how America is exceptional and worth defending, and that our rights in America come from God. They don't come from government. Hard work is a virtue. Conservatives understand that when work and income are separated, it's usually not a good thing. For women, understanding that a woman's differences from a man are her strength. Defending life, understanding money, service to others. These are things that make a good conservative woman. All of these characteristics.
Now, I'm so happy that you started the book with really what the most important theme is, that self-worth comes from God. It doesn't come from this secular society that we live in. But, and I'm sure you found this out during your research, far too often girls are told otherwise. Girls are told from a young age that their self-worth comes from physical beauty, and they're raised oftentimes in homes that underscore that and that take advantage and exploit that. So how do you deal with the realities of today's secular society that just drums into girls' minds that they are not worth what God actually deems them worth?
That's right. And also a lot of what goes on in the schools, the government schools and some of the private schools, this notion of self-esteem, that's the most important thing. Not really. Self-esteem is a self-satisfaction, and it's okay, but the self-worth from God, it's really the most important concept, knowing that a young woman that she's uniquely made and unconditionally loved by God is really key. And this liberal notion that, Uncle Sam, government, young women, if they'll just be happy with affirmative action and government health care and free stuff, that gives her self-worth. Well, we know that dependency on government programs fuels socialist and leftist belief. So it's an understanding that God creates us, and it's separate from the culture. It's something that makes a young woman makes anybody strong and healthy and able to resist a lot of the cultural indoctrination. It's looking to God. It's understanding that God makes you unique and special.
Now, I was doing some research for this discussion with you, and I found that a lot on the left blame Ronald Reagan and the rise of the Christian conservatives, the rise of the Christian coalition, as fueling the exodus of women from the Republican Party to the Democrat Party. How do you respond to that?
No, I think at core, most women are conservative in their hearts about their family, about their patriotism, about the strength of America. But I think that women get busy, Cheryl, and our lives are busy, and we're mothers, and we're working, and we have families. And if you just listen to ABC, NBC, CBS, and read most of the newspapers, the Washington Post, the New York Times, you're never even going to hear the conservative arguments. And they play on emotions, and they don't tell the full story. And I think that the biggest challenge for conservatives, and what we do here at the Center for Conservative Women, and what I'm trying to do with this book, is to point out how it's conservative policies that are really the ones that show caring and concern for people, the things that women care about. I don't think that women are innately liberal, but I think we have to do a better job of showing them how conservative policies are the ones that are the most caring for people and for children.
Yeah, I definitely think we need to do a better job because honestly, it drives me nuts, and I bet it does you as well, to see that the Democrat Party relies on women like they do blacks as a core voting base. But if you peel back what the Democrats stand for versus what Republicans stand for, conservative women are more in line with the Republican Party.
Absolutely. And when you look at some of the left-wing policies of today, defund the police. Oh, yeah, that's really going to be helpful to women who live in urban settings where the crime is so outrageous now they can't even walk outside. Or opposition to school choice. The kids are stuck in these dreadful, unsafe schools where they don't learn to read. And, okay, they're not allowed any option to select other schools. The policies of the left are so damaging to women and children, and we just have to do a better job of talking about that.
And so why do women vote for the Democrat Party? I don't understand.
They don't have enough time, or they haven't spent the time to listen, to hear different points of view. It almost happens by osmosis. And that's sort of the point of the book. For conservative parents who care, don't just say, oh, I'll just let her live her life and do her best. No, you can't do that anymore because, the forces arrayed against the family can be terrifying today. And they've got to work harder at thinking about the principles and teaching them. I mean, I'm a big advocate of dinner table conversations. First place, a lot of families don't even have dinner. You have to try to have dinner or lunch together and talk about things. I mean, from the time a girl is really little, you can talk about some of these issues at the dinner table over a nice meal and start to get her thinking about things because she's not going to hear it on TV, in most newspapers, or on social media. You're not going to hear the conservative ideas.
What do you think in your research? What did you find that was the biggest draw that pulled young women from conservative thought to the liberal ideology?
Well, I think that many parents especially don't understand how powerful social media is. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, they're immensely influential. And so the argument is that if parents don't restrict that at all, it's a very left-wing view, a very superficial beauty, a lot of phoniness. I think that curtailing screen time is a good place for parents to start. And why have your daughter settle for an empty online life? Have her join a church group. Have her involved in more fulfilling pursuits, music, arts, sports. Have her read. Moms and dads, you have to read, so your daughters see you reading. I mentioned a number of books that I would recommend for girls in it. These are all things that will make a girl think a little more and tend to turn her to the conservative side. If she's spending 6-7 hours a day on social media, Cheryl, she's probably going to be liberal if she's not getting any of the other stuff.
So, why should all of America care about the political leanings of our nation's women?
Well, I mean, the women, the hand that rocks the cradle, the women, the vote, the women are so influential in the life of our children, in the life of our country. And I think that Americans need to think about a generational change for our nation with our girls. I have 3 sons, so boys are terribly important too. But I've learned over my 28 years here of working with young women how strong and powerful, how effective young women who are taught the proper principles can be for our country. Everybody needs to care about that. It's very, very important for the future of our country, for our freedom, for our religious freedom, and for the well-being of our families.
So, when you look at these polls and these surveys that show millennials and the younger generations are rapidly turning towards socialism as a political viability for America and embracing it over capitalism, how does that change your message? Of it must raise the alarms even louder, right?
Well, I think that we have to show them these marvelous socialist paradises like Cuba, where people get on rafts and risk shark-infested waters to leave it. Venezuela, they're leaving by the tens of thousands, this socialist paradise. North Korea, communist China, where they'll beat you and torture you and execute you for your faith. I think that just showing examples of socialism today, of course, you know, the Bernie Sanders and the AOC says, oh, we're going to do it different. No, it's never been successful anywhere in the world, socialism. So I think just pointing out all these people in Central America that are trooping up through Mexico to come to America, how come they're not going to Venezuela? It's much closer because socialism is not good for people. Just giving kids examples like that. They can watch on the news, you know, the border situation. Why are they all coming to America and not getting on a raft and paddling out to Cuba, a socialist paradise? I mean, that speaks volumes to me.
So, during the course of your research, was there anything that really shocked you about the differences between women voters versus male voters?
Well, there were a couple of things that actually gave me some happiness. One is the issue of life, and this is not so much voters, but maybe younger people, but also women. You know, we're starting to shift the views on life. I think it has to do with sonograms and watching little babies on the sonogram, and also the idea of the end of life and older people. I think that defense of life from conception to natural death, I think we're actually making some progress on that. So that surprised me. And the other one is, you know, the differences between men and women with here in Fairfax County, Virginia, where I live, we had 12 school board members. 11 of them raised their hand to say, yes, the boys can go into the bathrooms with the little girls. Well, I think even liberal women and even some radical feminists are horrified at this effort to eliminate womanhood. So I guess there were 2 sort of happy surprises there, life and the difference between men and women. I think that we are making some progress, but we have a lot of work to do in other areas.
Just to finish with this last question, expanding on that point that you just raised, it seems to me that there's a good opportunity right now in America among conservatives to win the youthful female vote based on what's happening in women athletics or with the whole LGBTQ movement. Does your research underscore that opportunity?
Absolutely. The left-wing propaganda that men and women are exactly the same. I mean, it's shown to be so false. So many young women, and even in the Olympics, are robbed of opportunities to win an athletic contest because they're competing unfairly. The boys and men who think they're girls and women, they have bigger hearts, they have bigger muscles, they have bigger bodies. They're going to beat us every time. It really is a robbery that's unbelievable. So yeah, I think that is helping us make some progress in having people understand men and women are not exactly alike. We don't have differences in intelligence, but physically we do. And, the miracle of childbearing. Does anybody talk about that on the left? No, it's just we're all the same. No, we're not. We're quite different, and it's a wonderful thing.
The left always goes too far with its stupidity, I think. So,
They do. Yes, they do.
Michelle Easton, I want to thank you for your time. And How to Raise a Conservative Daughter. I'm sure it's a bestseller. If not now, it's destined to be. It's a very timely book, and thank you for writing it.
It is. Actually, we're going into a second printing, and I want to thank you so much for all the good that you do in the paper, and I'm just very grateful to you for letting me have a chance to talk about how to raise a conservative daughter.
Oh, it was great chatting with you, Michelle. Thank you for being on Bold and Blunt.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now. How to Raise a Conservative Daughter. A timely discussion, an important discussion. Look, if we could just get the nation's women to acknowledge that abortion is not a God-given right, we'd be halfway there. We'd be halfway there to shaping our daughters into conservative mindsets. Check out the book. Check back next Bold and Blunt for even more important discussions. And in the meanwhile, remember, stay blunt, stay bold.